He says, we saw chunks of rock flying where the bullets were hitting it, and I was by this rock, and I just never heard a thing.
A mortar dropped right behind us and killed 2 men right behind us, but it blew us out of this foxhole.
And I stepped over a dead Chinaman every step of the way.
This is Kyle Hunter and Elijah Fleming with Don't Mean Nothin. We're here with Patrick Finn and Jim Stafford talking about their experiences at the Chosin Reservoir during their service and during the Korean War. Great to have you guys on. Appreciate you having us out. We appreciate your service, of course.
Appreciate your interest.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
So we always start out with childhood. Let's talk a little bit about where you guys grew up and your family life, and we'll go from there.
For myself, I was born in Minneapolis over north on Knox Avenue, and we moved from there when I was about 2 or 3 to a farm out in Wisconsin, and I was there till I was about 15. Came back to the cities with my parents when they got done farming and took jobs in the cities. And all of that had been caused by the big depression of the 30s. But I went to school there, and when I got to be about 18, I first turned 18. I joined the Marine Reserves. And I did that because my brother said, if you ever join the Marine Corps, I'm going to kick your butt, he said. So I took that as kind of a challenge. And after he found out I joined, he said, welcome to the club. So it was a good relationship we had there.
So your brother served too?
My brother served both in the World War II and the Korean War, both.
Wow. Pat?
Yeah, I also was born in North Minneapolis, and we lived in a couple different houses north, and then we moved over to Northeast Minneapolis, and that's where I lived till I left home. I signed up in the Marine Reserves because some of my friends had done it. They had this nice uniform, and they could get into the beer hall and so on. So I fudged my age, and I was 16, and went to different summer camps and Tuesday night meetings and so on, and it was real enjoyable. But after my 3-year enlistment was up, I thought, well, I've played with this long enough, I can do something different. And so I told them I wasn't going to re-enlist. And they said, well, then you have to bring back your boondockers and your dungarees. I said, I don't have them. I've worn them out. They said, well, you have to either bring them back or pay for them. And I said, what would it cost if I just pay for them? And they said, $92. I said, that's a lot of money. I don't think I even know anybody that's got $92. So anyway, I said, what's the consequences? I'm on a stalemate, I can't do anything. And they said, well, you could re-enlist. I said, well, a simple solution, let's sign up. So I re-enlisted, and before a year was up, the Korean War broke out on June 25th, and I was in Korea.
Wow.
So,
why join so young? It was just because of the uniform?
yeah.
Really?
It's kind of a romantic thing. Nice uniform, and you could go into the beer hall out at the base.
Yeah.
Things like that.
And growing up around World War II and seeing a lot of the guys that came back after that, was that affect your decision at all? Having pride in country and
No, I don't think so. During World War II, I was too young to really get involved in it. World War II started, I was 9 or 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but seeing those guys, I mean, that did serve.
Well, my uncle, who was a paratrooper and jumped behind lines in Omaha Beach, he influenced me somewhat with his advice and so on. And he was kind of a hero all the way through, in a lot of different ways. But that was about the only influence other than the uniform.
What about you, Jim? Just your brother that egged you on? Anything else that made you want to join?
I don't know. It was kind of one of those kind of things that, yeah, my brother was a Marine, and so I really kind of looked up to him. And he had served in Bougainville in the Pacific, and another invasion or something, a couple of them. And anyway, I always thought it would be, be pretty neat. Well, it was fun, and we went to the summer camps, a couple weeks down at Camp Lejeune in the Carolinas for training, and besides the troop and stomp that we did at the base in Wold Chamberlain, where the Marine base was. And we go down there, and it was good. It was good training and so forth, and you find out about the camaraderie among the guys and so forth, and you got along. You kind of got a little bit into the brotherhood thing. I guess that's probably what brought me into the thing more than anything.
And being kids during World War II, what was it like growing up in that era?
Boy, I'll tell you what, we used to listen to the radio, follow that news all the time. We got letters from my brother, of course, telling about what it was in the Pacific. And all he did, we watched that. And of course, I like to draw, and there was airplanes and all that good stuff, so that was really an interest to me too. So it was fun as a kid.
Yeah. Pat?
Yeah, those were different times, so different than we have today. We were all more or less, if you look at it from today's standpoint, we were all poor, but we didn't know it. We didn't have a lot of the luxurious things that are available now. And as a kid at that age, I didn't really, didn't feel inconvenienced or didn't really follow the war that close. I would kind of watch the expressions on my parents' face when they heard the news at night and so on. I knew when something was serious and when it wasn't, but I'd shut that off right after and go play.
There you go.
There was always something to do for a kid, I loved it out there in the country, and running barefooted and so forth, but there was a lot of work, taking care of milking cows and cleaning barns and so forth. I did get my share of that. Yeah. Chop wood and carry water from the well.
Hard work.
Yeah, it was a lot of hard work, but it just became a way of life, and it didn't bother you a bit.
Did what you had to do.
Yep.
Gotcha. So when you did finally join the Marines, you said you were both in the reserves? Yes. So when the Korean War started, how long after did they call you to active and get you started to get ready to go over there?
Yeah, the war started in June 25th of 1950, and we were activated, in August or so? It wasn't long after the war.
In July.
Was it July?
Yeah, it was in July that we got activated, and I forget what we had, a week or less to get ready, get the sea bag packed, and be down at Wold Chamberlain or Fort Snelling by the train depot. And then there was guys that were coming. They were from Duluth, the reserves up at Duluth. They were on the train, and I think from maybe Rochester or something like that, some of these different places. So there was a mixture of people in there, but we had pretty much our own group.
Mm-hmm. The third group was from Illinois, Rockford, I believe. Remember that? Yeah. And they all kind of blended together, and took the troop train to California, and that was an old-fashioned. I mean, it was an old car, if you remember right. The wood windows and belching cold smoke. We went from Minneapolis and down through, followed the river for quite a while, I think. And I know we kind of meandered our way. It took us 4 days or at least something like that.
Somewhere in, it wasn't too long. It was a lot quicker than we wanted.
I'm sure. And were you guys, did you have knowledge of what was going on in Korea before they called you up?
But nothing like what was really happening.
Right. So how did they portray it? What were you thinking?
Well, they didn't give you much time to do a lot of extra thinking. They put us to work right away, training, trying to find out what we were going to be. And I had never fired a rocket launcher before, but that's what I ended up with, just because I had a couple of good shots on the range with it, and with some good information from the one calling the range. And so they slapped me on the back and said, rocket launcher, gunner. Now I'm assigned to it, and that's what I get to carry.
So you didn't really have an idea of how the fighting was there. It was more just you knew.
Not at the time.
Got it. And because of World War II ending so close to when Korea started, did you guys get the same level of training that guys would have gotten years after the Korean War or before, during World War II?
In my case, it was pretty abbreviated. They ran us through a crash course. It was long nights, very little sleep. And it seemed like the drill instructors were cruel, but looking back at it, they were our lifesavers. Really, they made us learn. You know. Let's get back what we knew. I didn't know anything. I didn't know where we were going or why we were going or what was happening there. And they're very close with the knowledge. But then I remember at the end of the train ride, we got on some buses, and they took us to Camp Pendleton, in my case. You were there too, Jim Pendleton.
I was at Pendleton.
And again, we're still civilians. And they say you get off the bus and you stand in those yellow footprints. From then on, they're your new mother.
So you knew that you were going to go somewhere.
Somewhere.
Yeah, you just didn't know what it was going to be yet.
Knew there was a war broke out in Korea, wherever that was.
Got it.
We pretty well knew that we were going to end up in Korea. But we went over on 2 different ships. One was called the Okanagan, and the other was the Bayfield. My brother was on the Bayfield. I was on the Okanagan. But we had loaded our own ships, got them ready for going over.
So when you do end up going over to Korea, do they brief you on the way there as to what the situation is, what you're about to walk into, or is there no communication on any of that?
I remember we did some target practicing on the ship.
Target practice and weapons, working with the weapons, and schooling and what have you. I don't remember too much of any defensive information or how to protect yourself or anything, but that didn't really show up until they took us on a little tour of what we were going to be looking at or looking for.
And what was that like?
Roughly like a field trip, except that you're looking for hidden foxholes, and those Koreans and Chinese were very, very good on their camouflage and their digging. Boy, could they dig!
I really lucked out. I met a guy that was a regular Marine, and he'd been through combat. A guy by the name of Ed Riley, and he definitely saved my life twice. And he got killed December 3rd, I believe it was, of that year. But without the knowledge that I got from him, I'm sure I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
One time I turned quick to shoot a Chinaman. There was a Chinese person that was next to me, and my rifle was frozen, and I went to shoot, and it just clicked. And Riley saw what was going on, and he killed him. So that's one of the savings. But another one is the ground was like rock, and he said, "We're going to dig deep foxholes." I said, "Yeah, that's pretty dang hard rock." And he's keep digging. And we'd take our K-bars and just beat up that dirt and pull it out. But so we did have deep foxholes where some of the guys would not do that, and they just put wood around or anything as a surrounding. Well, because of Ed's knowledge, we had deep foxholes. And the night on Hill 1520 for me, which was the worst battle that I was in, a mortar dropped right behind us and killed 2 men right behind us, and it blew us out of this foxhole, but it didn't kill us. We didn't get shrapnel or whatever because of Riley making me dig deep.
Wow.
So things like that. He was my guardian angel. He taught me, but he gave me a crash course. I think I learned more from Riley than I did Camp Pendleton.
Wow, I'm sure. Yeah. So going back to when you're about to get actually into Korea, while you're on the ship, you're getting close. Do you know you're going to land at Incheon? I know that Jim, you were at Incheon.
Yeah, we pulled into near Incheon. We were ways out, and most of the guys debarked. They went on shore, and they were actually, the actual invasion had happened just like a couple of days before, something like that. And I'm not sure about the time frame on that. But myself and a sergeant and another guy had to stay behind to help unload. And we were unloaded some stuff on ship, and then we took brought mail in, and we landed, and then I rejoined our group and so forth. And all the time I got this rocket launcher with me, and I carried that thing. I went through there was a couple of firefights that they went through, but no call for tanks or anti-tank or any use of it. So I'm there, but nothing is really happening. And then finally they secured Seoul, and then we turned around and went back to Incheon and loaded back on board an LST. And the LST went around and ended up where you were at, Pat, where we were
Wonsan?
at Wonsan, circling and waiting. And we were, I think, 12 days on board a LST, 12 or 14 days, something like that.
I went over on a General Walker troop ship, and about the same time, but just a different ship. And we, for some reason, I don't know if we were destined for Incheon and they changed it or whatever, but we circled in Wonsan Harbor for a long time. And we found out later, they don't tell you anything, but we found out later that the harbor was full of mines. And so that's why they had to get them swept first before we could land.
And the LST that we were on, that was circling, had an overload of apples, and we had apple pie, we had apple turnover, we had apple pudding, we had apple juice, we had apples every possible way you could.
So just to back it up a little bit, so for anybody that's watching this that doesn't know, what was the situation in Korea and when you guys got there? It was the invasion obviously had from the north to the south had already happened. Did they have total control of the southern half of the country?
Well, to me, it seemed like chaos. apparently they knew what they were doing, but they don't say much to you. But it wasn't really as chaotic as it looked. It's just that I didn't understand what was going on. The Marine Corps, I was fortunate that I was in that because everybody in the Marine Corps takes care of each other, and it's we fall back on our training. And I didn't realize how valuable these mean DIs were. But when you act impulsive, somehow in the back of your head, that knowledge is coming forward, I think. And we didn't go directly to Korea. We landed in Japan and were there for a few days. And then we took a Liberty ship from Japan over to Korea. And there was a hurricane going on. I don't know if you were in that, Jim, or not, but there was a hurricane. And so they were directing us around it on the outside. And it still was really bad. And this ship was going, people were all lined up along the deck throwing up. And then the wind would carry the puke back to, but they
I love that.
gave us a lot of crackers to eat.
I love that trip on the ship because when it was really rough, I remember I'd get on the tail end of the ship, and it would go up, and it'd be like 40 feet down to the water, and then all of a sudden come down. You're about 10 feet from the water. I loved it, and all the other guys are sick. So many guys got sick. But I thought it was fun. But that was a kid in me yet.
Yeah. Well, a few years back, I was reading about these Liberty ships. And Liberty ship is what we were on going to Korea, and they found out they could make them a lot faster if they welded them all tight, and in welding them, the ship wouldn't flex, and a lot of them broke in half. I'm glad I didn't know that when we were on aboard.
Wow. So, from a historical standpoint, you guys, when you got to Incheon, North Korea already had control of that part of the country, correct?
Well, when we hit Incheon, they suddenly realized they were going to be cut off. And the North Koreans were trying to get out of South Korea to get past that line where it looked like it was going to be total cutoff. And for quite a few of them did get through that. But when they secured Seoul and the country beyond, and they were by the 38th parallel, somewhere up in there, MacArthur decided that we're going north now. And we went north, landing at Wonsan and heading up towards that reservoir up there.
So, were you involved in the battles in the cities for Seoul?
I was there when it was happening, but didn't do any shooting or anything like that. There's no call for a rocket launcher at all.
I was never a fan of MacArthur at all, but I do give him credit for Incheon. That was a smart move. It was very dangerous because he was really risking a lot of men. And he pulled it off, God bless him. And the smart thing that he apparently was thinking about is their supply line for the North Koreans or the communists were stretched real thin heading south. And by doing the Incheon landing and breaking that supply line, they didn't have any fuel or food or whatever. So they kind of broke up and were just scrambling on their own, the communists I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And working their way back up. So it was a smart move.
Yeah, that was.
I have to give them this credit.
It was like coming in almost behind them, right?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Kind of breaking it.
I had to tell you something a little funny from Incheon. When we finally secured that area, they had an inspection. We all carried, guys that carried weapons carried .45 automatic. And And I wasn't real familiar with a 45 because I never carried one when I was over in the States or anything. Well, we have this inspection, and you hold the 45 pointed towards the sky, press the side button for the ejector to eject the clip, and a clip comes out in your hand, and you hold it up like this. Well, unfortunately, the clip went right over my hand onto the ground. And I did the only thing I could think of at the time. I reached out and picked it up and brought it back up like that. And the sergeant, he's not even looking at the 45, he's looking me in the eyes and he says, "Report to me after inspection." Well, I reported after inspection and he says, "Come here." He says, "See that trench?" And I looked down, there's a trench that's about 2 or 3 feet deep that runs as far as I could see. He says, "Fill that." I went to work with my shovel and I started filling in, but they recalled us back and then we went to load board ship. So I kind of got out from under it.
When we were heading north, before any of the chosen things or whatever, MacArthur wanted everybody to, MacArthur and Ullman, General Ullman, wanted everybody to rush, get up to the Yalu, and there was supposed to be ships there to take us back home for Christmas and so on. And we had such a wise general, Oliver Smith, O.P. Smith, that he knew better. He knew that he couldn't stretch his supply line that far and be safe. So he did everything except, I mean, he just dragged his feet in every way, except he didn't want to get, he wasn't insubordinate, but he's right at the edge of that. And I personally think that he saved the lives of thousands of men.
Really?
By doing that, yeah.
He kept us in
wise.
units.
Yep, he was wise.
He didn't let anybody get stretched out too far. You could send out a patrol, you send out a patrol in strength.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was.
He was a savior
good.
for us, I think.
Yeah.
So before Chosen, did you guys see a lot of action, or?
I didn't. We had action, skirmishes and so on, but nothing like we ran into.
We ran into tanks. We were coming down the road and they stopped to rest, and one of the guys leaned against a tank that was covered with stuff. And he started pushing aside because it was uncomfortable, and he saw the steel underneath. He stepped back and looked at it and he yelled, "Tanks." And it was like a wedge going down the road. The guy's getting off the road. And right away, I was down to the one side, and I had the rocket launcher. I got it coupled together and I got my assistant gunner got around in the thing, and I went down, and there's in the kind of a shed or like a shack, a building, and there was a tank in there. And I got ready to line up on that. Well, I didn't get a very good shot off. I don't know why, but something to do with the sight being cocked or something. And I turned around to get another round in, and there's these two guys, my gunner and ammo carrier, all crouched over on the way off away from me. And they're looking at me. And I yelled for them to get down there. And finally, they did. They came on a run, finally. And then afterwards, they told me that, they said, "Didn't you know what was going on?" They said, "We saw bullets flying off that rock you were by." He says, "We saw chunks of rock flying where the bullets were hitting it. And I was by this rock and I never heard a thing." But that tank, I was moved up to get in a little closer, and a plane hit it. They hit it with rockets and knocked me over. Well, I got straightened up again, and when they got the guy yelled for somebody to come up tank, I got up there and then I got a couple solid rounds into a tank there. And then I heard from the guys around that the 57 recoilless rifles and those guys had fired on tanks, and then I read about, I got a Stars and Stripe magazine about a week or so later, 10 days later, telling how in this battle, how those had got 5 tanks or 3 tanks or 4 tanks, and the Air Force had knocked out 3 of them, 7 tanks. Well, there was only 5 tanks mixed up in the thing. But they were each one was laying claim to more than one have. And I know I hit one solid twice. So, but.
So would you say that you had any experiences that halfway prepared you for what was to come in the coming weeks?
Not to what we went through, because we didn't run into any more tanks, and I got a rifle instead of my rocket launcher.
So did you guys head north to Chosin at the same time? Were you guys together?
Yeah.
They were further up north.
We were supposedly
My
ended up
group was.
about 20 miles this side of the Yalu River. I think we were supposed to have been the furthest north.
So just to give people that are watching this a little bit of backstory so that they know the situation that you guys were in, you guys had pushed back the North Koreans relatively quickly, right? And then MacArthur made the decision to continue north, to drive all the way through to the Chinese border. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it was just about all Chinese we started facing.
So you had no idea that the Chinese were there.
We found that out when we were even partway up to the reservoir. They ran into a group that they call a Chinese, I think they called it the Chinese Night Tiger Division. That's what I had heard. Whether that's so or not, I don't know, but they were Chinese. And we cleaned that whole group out. They never had a chance.
But they did capture some of the Chinese, and the Chinese were really open about what we were facing. And that was reported back to Japan, to MacArthur. He said, I think it was Allman that said, you're not going to let a few Chinese washermen or whatever scare you out. And they just poo-pooed it.
Right.
But the Chinese, as I understand it, I wasn't there, but were very open about what we were forced to, what we were against. They all, the amount of people that were there, and they also let us know that there were a couple 100,000 on the other side of the Yalu in case they needed help. The group that was in there, their mission was to wipe out the 1st Marine Division.
Wow.
Yeah, that was pretty open.
And while they were at it, they took out that army outfit that was up on the east side of the reservoir.
So what as far as uniforms, could you tell who was who when you guys were heading up there at any, like, what were the South Koreans wearing? What were the North Koreans wearing, and the Chinese?
Well, the North Koreans and the Chinese wore padded outfits. They insulated, I suppose, cotton, I don't know, but that was basically what they were wearing, and they didn't have helmets. They had pull-down
Those
full
flaps.
hats and tennis shoes. I don't know what they had in the tennis shoes for socks or anything like that.
Some didn't even have socks that I
Yeah,
ran
they had
across.
socks, but I mean,
I don't
not insulated.
know. No.
And what about the South Koreans that you ran into? Were they similar to what you guys were wearing as far as fatigues?
Everything was at night, all of the battles. So,
I didn't see much.
No,
Of
before
the-
you guys got there. I mean, in general, was it easy to distinguish who was the enemy and who wasn't?
not real easy, I don't think.
I don't know, other than the uniforms, the Chinese didn't have, I mean, South Koreans didn't have the same uniform that the North Koreans and Chinese had. North Koreans and Chinese had pretty basically the same
They're kind of a quilted
outfits.
thing.
Quilted,
And
yeah.
at night, if somebody shoot up a flare or whatever, the uniforms I saw were reflective, kind of. They were easier to see than ours.
Right.
You asked earlier about the training we had and so on. In my personal experience was that about half of what I needed was textbook, and the other half was on-the-job training
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Riley.
That's a good analogy.
How old were you guys at this time?
Well, by that time, 19, 18 or 19.
Well, I think you adapt real quick. When you hear a bullet come by, you don't stand there and wait to see if there's saying I was lucky it never hit me. You get the hill down right now. I can remember when I came home, I'd hear a backfire in a car and I was not down on the ground, but I was out of the area. I jumped, but it makes you pretty nervous. You can catch on real quick.
And what were the temperatures like when you first got there and then as you started to get further north?
I don't know what you had
South-
in Tucson,
south
but
was pretty pleasant,
It was
pretty
fine. It was like
decent.
a fall day, as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned, in Minnesota.
But the further north we got, the colder it got.
So as you got closer, when you actually got to Chosin, what were you looking at for weather?
Well, as I mentioned before, we were going uphill, and when we hit the Chosin, we were up in the mountains, and between that and the calendar change, going into winter, and at that time they had some real stiff winds coming down from Manchuria, and I think we had a kind of a perfect storm, if you will. But
But
it
was
turned
below
miserable
zero.
fast.
It was below zero just about all the time
Yeah.
up there when we got up to the reservoir.
And did you have jackets and winter
Oh, yeah.
clothing? You did.
We had good parkas, good mitts. You can't complain on that part. The boots were the worst part. And that's how I froze my feet, is that you put on clean socks and you put the boot on, your feet are warm for the first hour or so, and pretty soon you start sweating a little bit, and that sweat pretty soon turns to cold. And you just keep your feet moving, keep them moving all the time.
And just to clarify, we're talking about below -40 standing, right?
It was
Not always.
35 to
Yeah, they
40,
say it hit
some of the
35, 40 or whatever, but I would say it's probably average, maybe
35.
20 or below, or I don't know, somewhere in there.
I mean, that's
Cold
either
is
way,
cold.
it's cold. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's insanely cold. So walk us through getting to the reservoir, and then did you have an idea of where you guys were going to be positioned, where the Army unit was positioned? Was it just you, the 1st Marine Division, and that unit with you?
I don't know, they didn't tell me anything, but when I first really realized that trouble we were in and that the Chinese were there was, I think, November 27th or 28th was the worst 2 days I had in the whole thing. And that was about 1 o'clock in the morning. All of a sudden we heard these bugles and clattering and whistles and screaming and the smell of garlic, or whatever that but what they did is they surprised us, really. It was reported that there were Chinese in the area, so we put up the wire traps and so on. We had 50% guard, and then when they actually attacked, they came in. At least it was my experience, that they went right for the sleeping bags. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever. Two of the guys that I was with were stabbed to death that way. And I didn't really know what was happening.
Yeah. So walk us through, I guess, what the terrain looked like, and when you arrived, did they have you dig foxholes, or what was the process like before you ran into
We were in the mountain. Like I said, my biggest problem was on Hill 1520, which is 1,520 feet above sea level. So that alone was, a lot colder. Where was I going? I lost my track.
No, you're good. Just walk us through when you arrived there, what you're seeing, what's around you, and then what was going on before you started the engagement with the Chinese. Were they having you dig in somewhere? Were you in foxholes before you started to get attacked? What was that process
Again,
like?
if I could go back to my personal experience on this worst night, the Chinese had this hill or mountain, whatever you want to call it, and they were pretty well dug in. And we took that away from them, and they got pretty quiet. And we out of our group, I don't know how many we started with, but there was 18 that went down the hill sometime toward the end of the battle. It got a little quieter. I was up there with, there was a machine gunner and 5 riflemen. And as long as that machine gun was going, we were in pretty good shape. But the Chinese, being driven off the hill, knew that when that machine gun ran out, we were in trouble. And we sent for ammo, and the ammo carriers got ambushed on the way up. So they dropped the ammo and took everything off. So we were in a real tight spot. So when we got down to when the machine gun ran out, we found our way down the hill, and then they went back up. When we got down there, there was not enough men in our company to have a company. Item company just disappeared and blended in with Howe and one of the other ones. And that trip down the hill, didn't really know where we were going, and we heard a caterpillar and figured that must be us, so we headed that way. But on the way down, I heard real loud moaning and so on. It was we stopped, and it was a gunny sergeant that we knew, and we went to pick him up. He was really in bad shape, and he died shortly after we got him down the hill. But he was just, it was a bad experience. This guy was a really big, strapping guy, and here, when we picked him up, there wasn't much left of him. So a lot of those side things, Jim, that comes out as we talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you, Jim? You want to walk us through your experience from when you got there to?
Well, I can remember when the first night, I know we were set back. This was when I was still carrying the rocket launcher, and I just had a 45, and we were, I could hear the fight went on down below us from where we were, and the Chinese never made it up there. Well, apparently the unit that Pat was with finally made their way down and rejoined ours, and then as a group we went down to the next one. And I can remember walking across this field before this was into Hagaroo, I think it was, walking across this clearing that was probably 200 yards, and I stepped over a dead Chinaman every step of the way. And I got in there, and I found out my brother was there. And I went in, when I found his tent, I went in and saw him. We talked for a little bit. And I don't remember whether it was him or somebody else told me that a British Marine that had been with the Army unit on the east side of the lake had been wounded, and the Chinese had captured him, and they stripped him and threw him in the reservoir where there was some open water for whatever reason. I don't know how that got that way, and they left him. He got out and he ran it's either like 2 or 3 miles, something like that, across that one end of the lake, naked, into my brother's tent and said, I say, can you chaps spare some heat? Those guys were really, really tough and resilient. But anyway, we got hooked up there, and then we started the trip down from there. That's when I turned in the rocket launcher and got a rifle. And then we were we'd go out on, in groups to the left flank or the right flank, up into the hills and so forth, and clear out anything that we ran into. And we found one spot where there was an American-made 57 recoilless rifle pointed up down in towards the road where the guys, Marines, were crossing. And there was about 3 or 4 dead Chinese laying behind it. And what they had made a mistake that when they must have been right close to the thing when the muzzle blast, I mean the backfire hit them, killed all 4 of them. That's the only thing I could think of that happened. But anyway, we did those. We kept on doing that. And there was a couple places I was in. I don't know what, I can't remember nothing about it. And I can remember going up to one of the guys that was ahead of me, and he checked him out. He was dead. He'd been just shot just a few seconds before. And I remember being there and taking his food so the Chinese wouldn't get any food off from him. And that was my thinking. And that's all I remember about it. I don't remember what happened, how I got there, how I got out of there. It just never come back to me.
You know, one of the reserve guys from Minnesota was with me. And all of a sudden somebody said, well, where's David? I don't know, I haven't seen him for a while. And nobody knew where he was. So about 3 days later, somebody shot a Chinese soldier wearing Dave's clothes. That was a real heart-tugging experience. It just all the emotions went anywhere. I lost 3 people I was really close to on one battle, that one night, December 3rd. Riley and 2 others.
Walk us through that night and how it started. Did it just start with the bugles?
Well, the one guy, I'd seen him at chow in the morning, and he was one of the nicest guys, a real spiritual guy. And when the rest of us would go to the beer hall, he'd be reading his Bible or writing home and so on. And he got killed. That really hurts. I'm sure you had the same
His name wasn't Forsberg, was it?
No, it was Caldwell.
Caldwell. Oh,
Jerry
Caldwell.
Caldwell.
Okay, yeah. Forsberg was from Duluth. Very religious
Somebody
guy.
just asked me about him, about that name.
Yeah.
Oh,
Big tall
hello,
guy.
or somebody. And I said, no, I didn't know him. But as I remember, Jim, I don't know, correct me, but it seemed like down around Wonton and so on, it was fairly level, the ground and so on. Then it suddenly went up. And then when the temperature went down as we went up.
Were you guys in the same spot for a lot of the time that you were there?
I'm not sure.
Well, we came through the same areas,
Yeah.
I'm sure. I didn't get as far north as their outfit did, but on the way back, there was only one way back. And it was a good fight all the way down. And there's a couple of companies that really did a lot of work down there, getting things cleared out. Was that the one that those guys held that one pass? That was
Oh, that was Fox Company.
Fox Company.
Yeah, they got. I think they were the highest casualties of any of us of any group.
Yeah.
But the
most exposure.
there's 300 or so of them and thousands of Chinese. Then these guys in Fox Company kept the Chinese at bay until Colonel Davis asked for volunteers, and he took these volunteers across the mountain, just erotic as could be. And the stories that just went with that one trip, but they saved Fox Company. They got in there and it was by that pass,
Some of those guys,
Facilin Pass or whatever.
some of those guys fought with their shoes on. Didn't
Yeah.
even have their shoes on when they were fighting that.
Yeah. Harry Burke was one of those guys.
Yeah, Harry.
Yeah. You know, all of the terrible things we were talking about at breakfast, that there were some good stories. I look at it as, I call them mini miracles, but things that happened that, the bridge, for an example. How did somebody remember that there was a treadway bridge over in Japan? And who had the moxie to fly it over and use parachutes and so on and so forth? And they put that together, and I can't imagine how all of those things hit unless there was some divine help. The other thing I think of is when we were trying to get out, it was real foggy, and it was kind of a hopeless case because the air support couldn't fly because they couldn't see, and everybody was kind of, in a way, wringing their hands about what's going to happen. And they looked up in the sky and they saw this bright star, like the Star of Bethlehem, and that taught us that the Air Force would be able to come in the next day and
Clear skies.
clear skies, and they'd be able to. Where they really helped us, in my estimation, is they kept the Chinese at bay, and they kept their heads down because they would go back and forth frustrating. But to me, that we had help.
That I can remember at one point, just those guys that were in the flying. I can remember as they were digging in on the hillside. I looked straight out from me, and there's a Corsair coming in, big Marines written right across the fuselage, and the pilot is waving like this. We were waving back, It was, but boy, we really appreciated those guys.
They were brave.
Yeah,
They were brave. Boy, they came down awfully low.
low and often.
Yeah. I don't think we'd ever got out of there without the help of the Air Force.
Yeah, well, they dropped napalm and stuff. I'll tell you what, there's nothing that's like a good cookout when the weather's cold.
So how long were you guys at the Chosin Reservoir from the beginning of the battle to the end? Was it?
Boy, I don't know. The reservoir was what, the 26th of November that we got up there, or 25th, or
Yeah,
it must
we
have been what,
couldn't
10
have been
days.
there more than a couple weeks,
Yeah.
2 weeks, something like that. And then we started down out of there, and it took a while to get through. I can remember the last day we were up above. We still had Chinese all around us. The sergeant says, "You and your point." That's me and another guy. You were in point. So, okay. So rifles down the road we went with the bunch. They all started out, and we had gone down a little ways, and all of a sudden, we saw 2 Chinese run from behind the one rock. We yelled, "Gooks!" and we charged. And we were all over the guys were all over the building in seconds. And dropped hand grenades down into the bottom of this, below in the it was a hydroelectric plant. And dropped hand grenades in there and so forth, and spilled out on the other side, and the whole hillside was Chinese, and they were holding up the Marines across the valley from us. The road did a big loop, and they were holding them up. And we cleaned that hillside up on the one side, but then they started shooting at us from up above. Well, some of the guys took off, and I couldn't go with them. It was being shot at. It was too close, and I dropped behind to start shooting up towards the hill, but you couldn't see anything. And finally, it ended up myself and a guy from the army, an army group, and two Koreans, South Korean soldiers, rocks, went down into the valley and up the other side. And it took us about almost 2 hours to do that. And by that time, the guys that had come around, and some of them had already got through. And we broke through that trap. Well, that night I slept in a tent. The first time that I had been in a tent since way back when.
So talk us through, as an 18, 19-year-old kid, what's going through your mind while you're at the reservoir? How do you deal with that level of fear?
Mine was hourly preservation or survival. I didn't go much beyond that. I say that when we were attacked, I don't remember ever being scared until it was done. Then it scared the crap out of me. I started thinking about how close it was. But I don't know about you, Jim, but when it was happening, you're just too busy covering your butt and doing what you're supposed to do to keep that guy from killing you before you kill him.
Yeah, as long as they kept you busy, kept your mind off from it, and you occupy your mind with things that you'd like to write home, get a letter from home, that was it. But I'll tell you, many a time you find a little spare time, and you think to yourself, you start doing a little praying. So it makes a difference in everybody's life. I'll tell you, I can remember walking down the road, my feet hurt so bad because we didn't have the boots or anything like that. And it was just spontaneous. I said, "Oh God, take me out of here." But anyway, he looked out for me.
I say I did a lot of thank yous, not the foxhole promises.
Yeah, that was. There's a lot of times though that some of those guys, you could tell that they just wanted to go home.
When we were in the reservoir, whatever clothing you could get, you'd wear. Sometimes we had 5 or 6 layers between the long johns and the skivvies and and when I think back at that, I think that at 20 below zero weather, if you take a cup of water and throw it up in the air, it turns to ice before it hits the ground. Then relate that to going to the bathroom in Korea, the reservoir. It's crude to think of, but that was a problem. That was a problem.
Yeah, and then there's none of that digging in, as they call but I know in a lot of places they piled Chinese bodies up in front of them.
And when they brought the bridge in, they didn't have enough wood beams or whatever for support, and they used Chinese bodies, frozen bodies. It's hard to think about, but they were dead, and
You know, in
that
a,
act was saving the lives of the guys that were.
yeah. I was reading somewhere where they compared how many people were killed in how many Chinese, and they said that 40-some thousand Chinese died over there. Well, you know, were taken out of action. Well, the Chinese have a higher amount that they claim died over there.
Yeah.
Never.
We lost collectively, I think, 35,000. You know, that's counting the UK guys and wherever else they came from.
Yeah.
So I think
Up and down the reservoir, the almonds, not almond, but what was that colonel?
Ray.
Not the Army colonel.
Oh, Almond.
Not Almond, that he's general.
Oh yeah.
It was a guy, he was Love, I think his name was.
Oh, I don't know.
He was in command of the Army group that was up on the east side of the reservoir. And Almond gave him a medal.
Oh.
And he threw the medal away when Almond left.
Yeah, Almond, I remember the story now. He came in on the helicopter, and he wanted to get his rear end back out of there in a hurry. And whoever was in command of that group, he said, here, and he handed him 3 medals. He says, give these to some of the guys. And that guy's threw it on the ground.
How close were you to the enemy when this fighting was going on?
As close as I am to you.
Yeah, it got pretty close. I know that.
One of the problems was we were here, like on an island or whatever. They were all around us. So when you have a situation like that, you got to be careful who you shoot. You know, because you don't want to have any friendly fire and kill your buddies. And when there's a tight perimeter of people, it's at night, and you know.
Nothing is really clear cut.
What's that?
Nothing is clear cut. I mean,
No,
you can't.
no.
You got starbursts, and
Yeah. So sometimes you might miss a shot just to be sure that you didn't get the wrong guy.
Right. What was your visibility like at night? Was it pitch
There
black?
wasn't any, what do you call those flares that they shoot up in the air with a parachute?
what you had to do is do not look directly at whatever you want to see, because if you stare at it too long, it has a habit of moving. Even a bush will move if you're staring at it at night. And that was the way you could tell if something was around you. Don't look directly at it. And kind of crazy, sounds crazy, but it's the way it was.
And were the Chinese well equipped?
No. Oftentimes the first wave would have no arms. They'd wait till the first wave would get shot, and the next ones would come up, and they'd keep taking whatever arms that anybody else had that got killed.
What about clothing?
They had those quilt things.
Yeah, they quilted outfits, but there's groups of them that froze to death. Especially, they found that one hillside, I think there was just all over. They were all frozen.
It looked like
to death.
an army just there. They froze in the position that they were in. Those are kind of rude to look at. It's like the Chinese army of statues that they discovered.
The Chinese, in the tombs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
10,000 of them.
And how are you guys doing on ammunition and supplies? Were you running out of ammo up there?
Well, yeah, that's on the hill I was talking about. That's what's happened. We ran out of immediate ammunition. There was more down the bottom of the hill. But you've heard the Tootsie Roll story, I'm sure. Well, they had a code name for everything. And we were really in bad shape for mortar. And so somebody got on the radio or whatever to Japan and said, we need Tootsie Rolls really bad. And the next day, the flying boxcar came in, they get packets of Tootsie Rolls, thousands of them. They come to every one of our chosen few conventions. They always bring a whole bunch of.
I got them in the mail again.
I did too.
Yeah.
They're something else.
I can remember one time where I think we were headed north. We were going north. And myself and my assistant gunner and ammo carrier, that night, it was dark, there had been a drop of supplies with the parachutes, and we took it upon ourselves to take one of those parachutes and cover up with it because it was snowing, and we slept in that, and which was kind of warm, you know, 3 of us in there, there's enough body heat and what have you, and there was about this much snow on top of us, and in the morning we could see the light, and they said, okay, what we'll do, we'll count to 3 and then we'll throw the sides back so the snow doesn't get into the deal. And so here's, okay, 1, 2, 3. We threw these things back, and all of a sudden, bam, bam, here we are. We're on a big, bright red parachute. And they started shooting at us. And we ran. We got down a little bit down in the valley, but it was funny that we never had any idea what a red parachute. You always think of white parachutes.
My brother was in the Navy, and he got to be really good friends with a guy by the name of Cornelius Griffin. And they both got discharged, and my brother didn't hear from Griffin for a while. And finally he called him one day and he said, can I come up and visit you and your wife? And he said, yeah, sure. So I come up. And here he'd gone to the seminary after he got out of the Navy and became a Catholic priest. And he was in Korea when we were in there. And of course, I didn't know him. I'd never met the guy, but he was administering whatever prayers or whatever over a man that was in that Red Cross van you were talking about, and I think somebody lit a cigarette or whatever because there was a light, and Griffin took a shot to his jaw, took half his jaw off, and his aide or whatever threw his own body on the priest to save him, and he got shot. And the priest was in this Red Cross van and was really in bad shape. And a Baptist minister was another chaplain, and he saw him, and he was sure that he was dead or going to die. And so he administered the Catholic last rites to. I mean, this is how things get mixed up, but they're the same, you know. There's a lot of stories. It'd be nice if we could collect them all.
Funny
So
now that
untold.
you talk about that. I can remember the chaplain holding one service, quick service for us. And it was only about maybe 8 or 10 guys in there at the time. And it was just a short prayer meeting, so to speak. But it was good. It was pretty succinct for what we were running into.
I got to meet this chaplain long after Korea. He was at my brother's house for dinner or something, we got to talking, and you got to join that chosen few. You got to do that because that's blah 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 blah. But I don't even want to talk about Korea. Don't you know? But he gave me a bunch of reading material, and I hid it somewhere. and now I look back at it after being in the chosen few and realizing what good it did for guys like me. And I sure wish I could do a redo and talk to him. I mean, he could have told me a lot of really good true stories.
So, when you got back, how was your mental state as far as over the next few years after returning home to the States?
I drank heavier.
Yeah.
And my wife is a psychologist, and she kind of realized what was going on and helped. And I got into AA, and this June it'll be 50 years since I've had a drink. So
Wow. Yeah. Congrats.
And I'm sure that was had a lot to do with my feelings about God.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So how did you deal with everything that you saw and keep moving
Well, I
forward?
hit it in the back of my head. I never thought about it.
Yeah.
Just went on, got a job, and raised a family. And like I say, my family didn't. I've never told them anything about Korea. I didn't think it was important.
Does it feel better now that you're starting to talk about it more?
Oh, almost immediately when I got in the chosen few, and these guys are all my age, and pretty much my experience, and we'd share it. It's just like the favorite saying I've got is, "You're only as sick as the secret you keep," and that worked with me as I'd tell the family or whoever I was interested in the experience. It would just lighten the load.
What about you, Jim?
Yeah, I didn't have too much of a problem. Kind of jumpy, and all he would have to do was just say my name, and I would wake up from sleep. Didn't have to yell or anything. Took a few jobs around, never finding exactly what I want until finally one time I ran into my old art teacher from school, and he said, if you're interested, we're looking for somebody at the sign shop. So I took it, got into the sign business and stayed with it. I never had no, I had nightmares when I came back a few times, but I can still remember a dream one time where I could see all these Chinese coming with their rifles on port arms. They were wearing a barracks hat, and they had these sport jackets that they made in Japan, all shiny with the dragons and all that stuff. And in my dream, I could see them coming, and myself and this one guy are there. And I turned to say something to him, and he's gone. And here's the Chinese going on each side, and I'm thinking, I'm caught. And I woke up. But that was a dream. But I got in with another fellow that had been in the Marine Corps, and we went into partnership, and we built a business up pretty good. We had a pretty good sized company for a while, and then finally his kids got in there, and I decided to sell out, and I went on my own. And I was doing signs right up to last year. I did some signs yet almost just before this year.
Is there anything else that you guys want to share while we're here?
I don't know. You brought out a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
Let's hear them.
Oh, I don't know. Life is good. Life is good.
Life has treated us very well.
To be 92 and have decent health and so on, that's a blessing.
Yeah, I thank the one guy that told me, he said, keep your head down, don't volunteer for anything. And so I'm here today.
So a lot of gratitude.
I got out of the Marine Corps. I was out not even a month, and I went on a job interview. Somebody recommended I do it. I interviewed with the manager of this company, and he and I got along really well. And he's, boy, as far as I'm concerned, I want to hire you. But he says it's a formality. You have to talk to the boss's son and kind of get his blessing on it, you know. I said, "Ah, no problem." So I went and sat with the boss's son, and we were talking. It seemed pretty good. And he says, "What branch of service did you say you were in?" I said, "Marine Corps." "Oh," he said, "I was in the Navy. We know how to handle you guys." And that was it. I stomped out the door.
Yeah.
I ended up going back there for just a little while, 50 years.
When I left Korea, we ended up on board a hospital ship and then to the hospital in Japan for frozen feet. And I got shipped down to Guam to convalesce. And we were there for about 9 months. During that 9 months, we had one of the Marines was Japanese, spoke Japanese very well. And he talked. Some of the Japanese were holding out on Guam from the First or Second World War. They had been there since, I think it was 43 or 44. And here it is, it's 52, I think, right around 51, 1951. So the people from Guam, the Guamanians, were telling them the war was still going on and the Americans would kill them if they caught them, and they give them just a little bit, a handful of supplies, just to make them stay there, punish them, and they'd laugh about it. And finally, this Japanese Marine, he talked them into surrendering. There was 9 of them at that time.
I think I've heard that story. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was all just to punish them.
Yep, that's all
Those
they
of
were
us,
doing.
That came out of the Chosin Reservoir were divided up into 3 groups: Guam, and Subic Bay in the Philippines, and Hawaii. I won the draw. Hawaii.
I lost. I had 9 months on a rock. Actually, wasn't too bad.
Anything else you guys want to tell us? Any other stories you got?
Not that I can think of it.
I'll probably think of a dozen other things after I leave. But
On the way home.
We'll have to plan a day to come back down here and talk to you again at some point. That'd be good. Well, we appreciate you guys being on and talking with us. Once again, we appreciate your service. And we look forward to getting this out to people and letting them listen to the sacrifice you guys have made for this country and the freedom in Korea.
I think it's healing for us to
Good.
talk about it.
yeah.
I feel that way. Too.
Well, thank you for being interested in us.
Yeah. My feeling was that there was a lot of guys there wanting to kill me, and I better take the offensive and do what I'm supposed to do and do the killing. And I had a hard time with that when I first got back and out of the hospital in Japan. I really had a guilty conscience about killing a lot of people, but I talked to a chaplain and he kind of eased me around it. Now I know that by us doing that, we killed a lot of people, but I think at the same time we kept a lot of people from getting killed. Because communism would have kept going, and all the evil things that they do would have intensified as far as I'm concerned.
No, there was not too much fanfare or anything like that.
Couple people
Relatives
says
and
where you been.
patients happy to see us, and that was about it. You go back, get a job. Nobody said, well, what did you do, or anything like that. Nobody asked. But that was a lot better than the poor guys from the Vietnam, the way they got treated.